Welcome everyone and welcome to this week's F3 Fixed Track Guide. We are at Snetterton this week, the 300 layouts, the longest of the 3 layouts that are available for us, and what a little gem this track is. Snetterton, personally, I've only really raced this in GT cars, GT3, and it's always been not that enjoyable of an experience. This track feels like it's a little bit too small width-wise for GT3 cars, but in this F3 car, from what I've experienced running these laps to put this track guide together for you, it's a real joy to drive, especially when you hook up those corners. It really suits the high downforce that this car provides. Now the fixed setup, once again, iRacing, you are 2 for 2 so far. Watkins Glen fixed setup was brilliant, and so far this one is as well. So stable, really enjoyable to drive. I don't feel like there's too much that needs to be tweaked, if I'm honest. The only thing I did tweak, as always, is the brake bias. So once again, this is personal preference, but I found 55.5, which is the standard brake bias, is too much, locking up the wheels. I actually brought this back, the brake bias back a little bit further than I normally do, to 54.1. That's a few extra clicks than normal because I just was locking up the brakes quite a bit. So yeah, that's my reference for you guys. That's what I would advise. As always, do a bit of practice yourself, find out what works for you. Everyone has different braking techniques, everyone has different driving styles. Now, this track temperature. So for reference, guys, I always set up these sessions as per the iRacing schedule. They have a time and date of the sessions that the track will be based on that week. And then I click auto generate on the weather, and then that gives me my track conditions. So this can fluctuate from session to session. It probably will during the week, but this was a 19-degree track temperature and quite a cold air temperature as well. So what I noticed with that is that it took quite a few extra laps for the tyres to come up to temperature, around 5 to 6 laps. Normally it takes probably a couple. So what you'll find is probably your qualifying laps, and especially early on in the race when you've got a full tank of fuel, cold tyres, there's going to be a lot of lifting and braking a lot earlier. Some of these corners that you're going to see here on this track guide, on this hot lap, where I'm going through full throttle, won't be the case early on in the race. That's only because I got the tyres up to temperature into the optimum range, and of course burned off a little bit of fuel as well. This time I set a 1:37.2 was set with around about half a tank of fuel, so I've done quite a few laps on the tyres to get them up to temperature and in that optimum range. So yeah, as always, be careful guys in your qualifying times and on your opening laps as well. Just hold back, don't push as much until you know you've got the grip in those tyres. But yeah, as always, this is going to be a hot lap from the cockpit view. You're going to see that lap from the far chase camera angle, and then we're going to analyse that hot lap and point out, as always, how we did it, certain areas to look for, braking markers, and as always, a couple of little tips on this track to keep an eye out for that will help you improve your lap times. But yeah, lo and behold, let's get into it. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and enjoy. So guys, that was the hot lap from the cockpit view and the far chase camera angle. Let's now analyse it and see how we did it and pick out our braking markers and pick out certain points on this track to look out for. And one of the first things I'm going to point out as we pause it here, and we've just gone past the start finish line, is on this main straight, you want to hold the left hand side or at least the middle of the track. If you move over to the right hand side, I've discovered a little stuffy tip for you here. I've discovered there's a very large bump and it hits your car very hard. Not enough to throw you off course or to spin your car, but it does hit you quite hard that you lose quite a bit of speed. So if you're going for an overtaking maneuver or if you're in qualifying, that's gonna not help you at all. It's gonna pull you up and we don't want that. Of course, we want to optimize our lap times as much as possible and try and get past the people that we're trying to overtake as clean as possible as well. So yeah, just be sure when you're overtaking someone or in your qualifying lap, move over to the left hand side. But of course, we do want the inside line down into this corner because it is a fast right-hander. So inside line is preferable, so at least middle of the track. But yeah, little tidbit there to start us off. But let's run down to the first corner, and what a first corner it is. A very high downforce corner, not a lot of lift in here. Of course, when you've got a full tank of fuel or you've got cold tyres, it's a different scenario. You will probably dab the brakes a little bit, but let's have a look when everything's in optimum range. So we're just going to slow it down here, and what we're keeping an eye out for is this marker here, the 1 marker, and that's your turning point. This is when we then want to turn in. Of course, we're all the way over to the left hand side here, and you may have seen in the far chase camera angle I was probably a little bit too far over because I slightly touched the grass. So just be careful about that in trying to open this corner as much as you can, that you don't make a silly mistake, because that could easily have been the case for myself. But we're turning in, and then as we see the apex come into view, that's when we're just going to have a slight lift, but we're not lifting all the way off of the throttle. Now, as I said, when you've got a full tank of fuel, cold tyres at the first couple of laps of the race, where everything's coming up to temperature, you probably will take a full lift off of the throttle. But this setup's got a nice amount of downforce through here, and you will need to lift. You can't go through here full throttle. I've tried it. You just run out of track, and you end up off the track on the left hand side, and your race will be over and done with. So yeah, a lift is required here. And then as we get onto the right curb, or the right hand side curb, we want to be on this nice and tight. That's when we then hit the full throttle, as you can see here. The car is going to drift a little bit just because of the lateral movement, and then we bring it back in kind of like a double apex really, this corner, and we hit the apex again here, nice and tight, allowing the car to drift over to the left hand side. And that's your first corner. If you are overtaking there, inside line is preferable, because you're just, yeah, you want to be nice and tight through there. I can speak from experience in GT3 cars. You try and hang it around the outside, you just run out of track very quickly. So inside line. Now we come down to tight hairpin. Now this is where we're going to see probably a lot of crashes, guys, because it's in these cars, of course, it's very easy to get on the throttle very quickly and for the back end to spin out. And it's very easy here as well, I've found, to lock up. That's why I've moved the brake bias back a little bit. And you'll even see in a second that I do lock up the front right wheel, which is always a detriment. And I did lose probably a couple of hundredths because of that. But what we're keeping an eye out for, as we just bring it back a touch, is the 2 bald marker. And we want to be braking pretty much in between, just after it, in between that and the 1 bald marker. We're shifting down, holding over to the left hand side, shifting down into second, and then as really the turn-in marker comes into view to let us know it's a hairpin, we turn in. And we're trail braking round here, getting the nose of the car turning in. And then you have to be wary here not to turn in too early, because there is a big old sausage curb here that we want to be as close to as possible with our right wheel. But of course, if we hit it, then it's really going to unsettle the car and you're going to lose a lot of time and be a sitting duck coming out of this hairpin. So you can see here I've just locked up slightly, so I probably should have broken a little bit earlier to make sure I've got a nice roll of the car. And then as we get round, you can see I'm starting to get back on the throttle, but I'm easing on the throttle because I'm on full steering lock here. Not 90 degrees, I've got full lock. If I get on full throttle now, that car is just going to spin. And speaking from experience, once again, done that plenty of times while putting this lap together for you. And then we unwind the steering, and it's only then as we're pointing the car over to this bit of the curb, this is the other track layout that goes onto the straight that we'll run to shortly, we get on full throttle. And there's a little bit of a runoff here with this curb that we can use. And then we bring the car over to the right hand side. So lots of practice required for that hairpin. There's going to be lots of people getting too eager, especially in the first couple of laps, as always, getting too eager on that throttle and spinning the car. So if you're following people, be wary. Slower is better out of there, in all honesty, because it's a very short run down into this next corner. So unless someone's right on your behind, it's not really going to be an overtaking opportunity here. But this corner is essential because there's a little bit of a longer straight, as we'll see shortly, that does open up an overtaking opportunity. So we're keeping the car over to the right hand side, and you can see here, obviously quite a sharp left-hander, but a left-hander with this setup doesn't require really any braking. We can just turn in and lift off the throttle, get back on the throttle. As you can see, I'm kind of half throttle until I'm around halfway round this red and white curb. If you want a visual reference, you can use these red markers up here, but as always, we should be looking into the apex, or at this point we should be looking beyond the apex, looking at the exit of the corner as we're going around it. And as you can see, get back on full throttle, allow the car to drift out to the right, because there's a nice big chunk of runoff here that we can use, and come back on to this straight. Now that is a nice free-flowing corner, and as I said, if really the hairpin is trying to, not necessarily an overtake, it's not really an overtaking maneuver, that corner, you will see it happen, but it's more about setting up this little straight here, because we come back into another, or we go into another hairpin, so quite a hard braking zone, but which can open up an overtaking opportunity. And what we keep an eye out for is the 2 board marker, and we're going to be braking just after it. I feel like I'm braking on it. It's probably my delayed reactions, but I feel like just as that goes out of my peripheral vision, that's when I'm braking. Very similar to the other hairpin, kind of in between the 2 markers. Holding the right hand side, and we want to shift down into second gear. Turn in as you see the marker again to show us that it's a hairpin, and we want to try and get as tight to this hairpin as possible, or the apex of the hairpin as possible. And then as we get halfway around it, that's when we're getting back on the throttle. You can see this hut here. That's really when you can then get on the throttle, open up the steering. And this one hasn't got a lot of runoff at all, so be careful getting on the throttle too early, because you'll either run out of track or you'll spin the car again as it rotates on itself. Now we come up to a corner that is in this situation here, as I've said before, where we've got optimum temperatures, the car is in a nice place, it's done quite a few laps. This is full throttle. but not when you've got cold tyres and a full tank of fuel. This is going to be a lift. But the turning point is exactly the same. Now, what we don't want to do is turn in too late, which is very easy to do. You don't want to be using this marker that indicates obviously the corner goes left as your turning point. You want to be turning in before that. As you can see here, we're turning in quite considerably before. So really, as the hut on our right hand side kind of disappears from our view, that's when we're starting to turn in. And we want to get as close to these poles as possible. If you cut this, if you go over these poles, you will get an off track and you will get a slowdown. So you don't want to cut it too much, but we can get really close to them, not lifting whatsoever, using the runoff that we've got available to us in 5th gear. And then we come up to a sharp right-hander. Now this one, we're braking on the marker that indicates it goes sharp right. And we're shifting down into 2nd gear. Now, what you can do in GT3 cars and GT cars is you can cut this corner quite considerably. But what I found is that I didn't gain anything from that in this F3 car. It's just, if anything, it's more likely to unsettle the car, and as you come off of the curb and want to get on the throttle, I spun it more times than not because it kind of unsettled the car, bobbled the back end a bit, and you just can't get the traction that you want. So we want to be on it as close as we can on the red and white curbs, and as you can see, just as we rewind it back, as we just before we've exited the corner, we're on the throttle, off the brake and on the throttle, opening up the steering so that we're trying to get the car as straight as possible so that we don't spin it. And then we're bringing it over to the left-hand side. And then this is another great corner because it's only a slight lift here. What we're keeping an eye out for is this board is our turning point. Or if you want to be specific, you can see the discoloration of the grass on the left-hand side where it's kind of dirt. That where it ends just before the board, that is pretty much our turning point. As you can see, starting to turn in. I kind of use that as a reference to turning just before the board, and we're lifting. You can see here we're lifting, but I'm still on the throttle slightly. I'm not doing a full lift. You will do, as I keep on reiterating, can't reiterate it enough, if you've got a full tank of fuel and cold tyres, you will need a bit larger lift to get the car turning in. And then as we get to this apex, you can see here there's like a concrete patch on the inside. And what we're doing, we're easing on the throttle here as we go around the apex. But then when the nose of my car pretty much comes into touching distance in my vision, that's when I'm then on full throttle, close to the apex, use the little runoff that we've got there, and then down the back straight. Moving over to the right hand side, and then we come to the most difficult section of this whole track, and probably where you're going to see more crashes than anywhere else on the track, more than the hairpins. Anyone who knows Snetterton will be familiar with this chicane, and it is a poxy chicane. It's what Snetterton is synonymous for. Now we're going to slow this down, and as we're heading down here, we're all the way over the right hand side. As we can see, the track goes left and then it goes sharply to the right, and we turn in on the board marker here, the one board marker. We start to turn in, and then just before we get to these boards, we're braking and we're trail braking, we shift down into 5th, down into 4th. And this is the kicker here, guys. This is the real important part. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to keep this car on this apex as close as possible so that we can open up the right hander. If you go wide of this apex, you're then cutting yourself short with this right-hander. It is pretty much a right angle, the second part of this chicane, and it is a very horrible big sausage curve that you're about to see, and you'll just lose so much time because you'll have to shift down an extra gear or an extra 2 gears to get the car turning in and round that corner. So as you can see, we can almost pretty much go through this second bollard that we've got here. We're in 4th gear, and then at this point we're then going to shift down into 3rd. But what you're going to see is that I don't lift off the brake. At this point, I then get on the brake quite hard. As you can see, that's gone from being just a slight trail brake to then shifting down into 3rd. You can see I've got the car pointing perpendicular with the track so that I'm opened up the right hander, and you can see this big sausage curb in the view. Horrible, nasty thing it is. And then, as before, we want to be as close as possible to this without actually hitting it, because it really will unsettle the car. Look at it. Ugh, nasty thing. Take it in 3rd gear. I take it in 3rd. That was the quickest way that I found. If you're struggling with turning, shift down into 2nd just to get more front end turning in. It's a horrible corner. There's very, very little runoff here that you're about to see, and it's just so easy to go wide here. And as we know, with these F3 cars on grass, it's like driving on ice, so you do not want to go wide. But as we just slow that down again, slight little trail braking, so we've braked hard, then we're into the trail braking again, and then as we hit this curb, that's when we're then back onto the throttle, opening up the steering and using the most of the little runoff that we've got. Now, quick right hander, full throttle through here, keep it as close to the apex as possible, allow the car to move to the left hand side, and now we've got a very long right hander that, once again, and I keep sounding like a broken record, when we've got the tyres up to temperature like we have here with a little bit less fuel, we are able to take this flat round here for the majority of it until we get round to the braking zone. When you're in full tank of fuel, cold tyres, this is not flat whatsoever. You will have to lift. So put your ego aside. First couple of laps, you will have to lift because the car just won't turn in. It will just drift too far out, and very similar to the chicane here, as we're about to show you. You want to keep it tight so that you can open up and get the exit onto the main straight, because it's a very tight left-hander. We run this round, 5th gear, keeping it tight. Just trust that downforce, trust that grip. And what we're keeping an eye out for here, guys, is these bollards, and you want to count them. There's a total of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what you want to keep an eye out for is the 4th one, pretty much, the 4th and the 3rd, because I visualize or feel as if I'm braking just after the 4th one, or in between the 4th and the 3rd. That's when I feel like I'm braking. Straighten up the steering, the car will wobble a bit, it will want to go on you. Of course, when you've got the tyres up to temperature, and I keep saying it, you can trust it. Shift down into 2nd gear. See how because we've held the right hand side, we've opened up this left hander. There's another horrible sausage curve that we've got here that we want to avoid, but get as close to as possible. And you can see a little bit of trail braking, and then as we hit this apex, there's a nice little bit of runoff here on the exit. Straight on the throttle. And then all the way through the gears up to the start finish line. And there we go. There's a lot to take in there, guys. It's a track that is going to take a bit of practice, more so than Watkins Glen, to say the least. It's a very technical track. And that last sector is where I mean, every sector time can be made up, but the last sector is where a lot of time can be made up. I feel like slower. If you feel like you're going too slow in the last sector through that chicane and out that left-hander, it's probably quicker. It's very easy to go too fast. As I said, very easy to run out wides through the chicane. It's very easy to just get to try and trust the downforce a little bit too early when you haven't got the grip in the race and it drifts out wide, and then you're just... the exit is the all-important thing. As we always say, slow in, fast out. That last sector really is the case. But yeah, I hope that explains it for you all, guys. I hope that will improve your lap times and make you more consistent. Avoid those big pesky sausage curves. If you can do that this week, you'll probably end up having some good races and some good results. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Feel free to comment in the comments below. And happy racing, guys. Good luck. Bye.